what I find significant on these AFIs for your essay.
Is this the same?
We're waiting on more copies?
Yeah, he's making a couple more copies.
Is this the same training you came to E-Flight to do?
Yeah.
Those guys said it was the best training in their Air Force recruiting career.
Man.
He pluralized now. You got more than one person there.
I didn't say that. E-Flight said
I'm trying to see.
that.
I don't know what already had. I'm just trying to see.
You didn't take that brown stuff off your nose from yesterday, did you?
It's actually it's been on there so long. It's been on there so long. It's permanent now.
Promote now.
No, please don't.
Promote now.
No.
Well, at least we know how the stratification works in the squadron.
Very transparent. Very transparent.
Oh man.
All right, so we'll go through each one of these forms. It's not chronological, you know, because all this stuff we're going to implement when we start going through the grade determination. So with that said, I gave each one of y'all a highlighter. And so maybe. So let's go through. I'm on the black page. Again, color coordinated with my little girl's crayons this morning. So on the black form, everybody got it? It's called the Medical Corps Special Pay Tables. So each year, and let me again preface this by saying you probably already know this, or you may need to bone up on your skills. So I'm going to talk to you like you're a brand new HP recruiter, because in a lot of cases you're going to have to do the same when you're talking to your new folks, and especially your new OA/LO recruiters that are going to be eventually under your charge. Okay, so the black form, the special pay tables. Each year, the Air Force determines what specialties will be given a bonus, a session bonus, right? Typically, it's the same year in, year out, but every once in a while you'll see a distinction if they want to focus on flight surgery or family medicine or whatnot. But typically you'll have your internal, your peds, your family medicine. So if you'll notice, aerospace medicine 48A, there's one quota for that, and it's a 4-year bonus, 180 grand. Those are individuals that have been in the Air Force. They've always been in the Air Force because they have to have went through the aerospace medicine residency, right? That's another residency within the Air Force. And so those individuals, most likely, you're not going to run into in the civilian environment unless you do stumble on the prior service guy. So if they've got the aerospace medicine residency certificate, then they're considered 48A. The rest of them, the rest of the ones that are interested in flight surgery are 48R. Everybody see that distinction? If you notice, flight surgery, they've got an asterisk about the bonus amount. It varies. Typically, you'll be, family medicine, primary care, those folks. So whatever that specialty, the bonus for that specialty, that would apply to 48R. Questions on that? This is a 4-year bonus amount, so that's an obligation that they agree to, and it's concurrent with what their initial obligation signing with you is. So for everybody that comes in and has no prior service in that specific career field, it's a 3-year obligation. If they've had experience in that specialty, it's a 4-year obligation. Okay, so that's the service commitment right off the bat. And then you start talking about contracts and agreements that are laid on top of that. Bonus being one of them. It's a 4-year obligation, but it runs concurrent, right? So essentially, it's an additional year, right? right? It's a lot easier to explain to medical HPSPs because it's a 4-year commitment. If it's 4 year, they repay for 4 years. But for civilian physicians that come in 3 years and then they get the bonus, that makes it a 4-year obligation. And there's a form we'll cover that talks more about that. So, any questions on it?
That being said, at their prior service, they're ineligible for this bonus.
Depends.
If they've been out for more than 2 years.
Yeah.
Correct. So that is key. If they've been in the IRR for less, been out of the IRR for less than 2 years, they're ineligible. And that's come to burn us before, where we had an individual that got out years ago, and the IRR never discharged her. Just didn't fall off the books as it should have. And so this was like 6-7 years later, and she comes back in, and so as part of that process, you say, I need all your prior service documents. In addition to, I see that your 214 puts you in the IRR. I'll need a release from that too. So we send up, there's no IRR discharge. So they say, no, she's on the books. Okay, well, we need a conditional release then. So we get the conditional release, and then we realize, wait a minute. She's not eligible for the bonus. And through no fault of her own. It's a clerical error on their part. So it ended up, we ended up getting it corrected. So she did get the bonus. I believe it was a dentist, a specialized dentist. But anyway, be wary of that.
So if it's less than 2 years, they're not eligible.
Correct.
So if somebody was in for 4 years, then in all reality, they would have had to have been out for 6 years.
Yep.
Before
Now,
they can get the bonus.
So this happened also is if they're a nurse that is offered a bonus, or a retention bonus, and they're holding that in the IRR, they would be able to apply for the retention bonus if they're within that 2 years of separation. Yes or no? Or do they have to be still in that core currently?
Retention bonus, and I can't say for certain because I don't have the retention bonus. First of all, we don't have FY19 special pays uploaded yet, but the retention bonus is different from a session bonus because the retention bonus is as soon as your session bonus runs out, you can sign up for the retention bonus immediately. So I can't say for certain, but I want to believe that yes, you can come in with the retention bonus, even though you've been in the IRR.
I want to say that's how we lost a bonus for somebody because they were within that 2 year span,
right.
But then we were able to somehow get in the retention bonus. But before you guys offer that to any of your applicants, make sure you read into it to make sure that one, it's available for the specialty that they're currently holding, and two, make sure that they figure out if they have to be in that career field or if they could have been in that career field prior to that 2 year period, because they might not be eligible for a retention bonus when they're not currently holding that specialty. You see what I'm saying? So just make sure you guys really look into that. There might be some ways to still get them a bonus, and you're gonna have to dig to try to figure it out, or let's get a hold of AAC and ask the question.
Yeah. So if you haven't reviewed as a supervisor reviewed each of the pay plans, I recommend that you do. It's been streamlined over the years. In my mind, it used to be pretty complicated, but now with legacy gone, and now it's the consolidated special pay. It's very limited and very specific, and so it's user friendly when you read through it. Okay, so that's the bonus, and the bonus doesn't go on the 1431. It's because the 1431 is special pays and base pay and housing and VAS. Bonuses don't go there. Now you can put a remark there in the remark section just to ease their mind, right? Because if you've been promising $200,000 bonus and all of a sudden you slide this this contract over and it's well below what they were expecting, you might want to put that little statement in the block that says you are eligible, for the $180,000 bonus to be paid in lump sum or installments, basically, whatever. Make sense? Okay. The blue page. This is 2005. 2005 is a wealth of information. They used to have 2005 and in 2008. 2005 was when you would commission folks into the reserves, and in 2008 was when you would enter them onto active duty. And it could be very confusing, which one was which. So a few years ago, they consolidated it into one document, and that being the 2005. The reason I printed out these pages, 55 through 61, this is talking about service credit and what these individuals are entitled to based on their experience, their resume. Okay, so if you look at orange paper, the things that are listed on this orange sheet follow this table. Okay, and so I wanted to make sure that y'all had a reference for when these questions come up. Why is that? Well, because it's right here. I don't know why it is. It just is. It's in the AFI. So, prior commission service, rule number 1, commission service on active duty in the professional specialty. So if they were a physician in the Army and they come to the Air Force, then all that time counts day for day, year for year, right? If they were, this happens a lot, let's say they're an MSC officer in the Guard, they come in active duty as a nurse, that's half. We'll give them half credit for grade, okay? So just because you were statistics driven and you made the rank of major doesn't mean you're going to be a major as a physician or as a nurse. We're going to start it at half credit. Make sense? Rule 3, while you're commission service, while you're participating in an education program leading to an appointment in medical corps or dental corps. This is talking about HPSP. No, it's not HPSP. What's that? NTP, right. Commission service on active duty or in an active status while participating in an educational program leading to an appointment in medical corps, dental corps. AFIT is one of them. Internships, residencies. Rule 4. This is where it starts to talk about what you're able to give them. Medical degree, dental degree, 4 years. Rule 5. Any internship through GME or Osteopathic Association, year for year. Rule 6. Again, residencies. Rule 7. Graduate education or postgraduate education, year for year. Master's degree or doctorate in the field listed. I believe I've included that as well. For physicians, it's typically public health only. If they've got a master's degree in public health, they'll allow that. But never promise. Always verify before that. Rule 9, full-time experience as a physician or dentist. Half a year for the first 6 years. Always understand that experience begins at the intersection of licensure and 40 hours a week, okay, of acute care. If those two things aren't there, then it's not experience. Okay? There's caveats as with everything. You know, some hospitals may have a, you know, full-time is 32 hours, you know, or 35 hours is what we consider full-time here at Methodist Hospital. That's fine. Give us, I think it's called a letter of reciprocity, or tell us that, and we'll include it, and we'll give them the time, okay? But typically 40 hours a week, patient care, licensed, that's when you can start giving folks experience. You'll have CVs and you'll have resumes that say, you know, I taught, I was a professor, I did all this, you know, Colonel Jackson was a commander, 342 for two years. No, it doesn't count because he wasn't seeing patients 40 hours a week. So when you're looking at these resumes, be able to scrutinize what you're seeing, because you know, they'll put everything on there. And for the purposes of this exercise, you're trying to read through the fluff and get to things that really matter with regard to rank and pay. Okay? Yeah.
Chief, I just want to say also one thing that I learned the hard way 2 weeks ago with Nurse Corps. It is not experience unless it is paid. And volunteering at a naval hospital is not, you know what I mean, even for 6 months in order to get a, you know, a licensing credit. You know, sounds great, sounds legit, but it is if the money is not exchanged, the Corps will not accept it. And what's resulting in, we are having an emergency scroll right now, down scrolling a select for January cop because of that.
I ran into another situation like that too. A nurse had 15 years credit, so I gave her like 7 years credit on the 1431. And it turns out I didn't realize that max is 3 years, so she only got actually 3 years. So instead of 03, she was actually 02. We had to re-scroll her as well.
Yeah, buddy.
Another thing with nurses, so is a BSN required to get your RN?
No.
Right,
No.
so when does the credit start for
RN.
Also, if they have a master's degree, we don't give them credit for it unless that's the specialty we're hiring
Yep.
for.
Or if they got their RN and then, you know,
It's for nurses.
5 years later they got their BSN, the credit goes back to
when their license started.
goes back to their RN days. So if they were working for 4 years, 5 years with just a 2-year degree, they still get credit for that.
Not for work experience. It doesn't have to be a specialty. As long as they have work experience.
It has to be credible.
They have to have
6 months within the
months
specialty they're
within the
applying for.
specialty.
Yeah.
But the RN experience goes back to when
Get the license.
Right. So if they've been if they're a practicing med surgeon nurse for like 4 years, and then when it's 6 months as an OR nurse, then they can still apply as an OR nurse, and they still get credit for all that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, sir.
Page 56, in the notes section, get your highlighter out. We'll start running through some of these. The first line, count a period only once.
Chief,
Yep.
they have a disagreement, and we don't know.
All right.
For nurses, if they have their BSN, and we're hiring them based on the fact that they have their BSN.
Right.
And say they've worked for like 6 years and they go back to their masters, and they're gonna get their masters in 3 months from now, we can't give them credit for their masters. We can only give them credit for their BSN.
You said they're gonna get their master's?
Yeah.
Unless they're coming in with that
What?
MSN.
If they already have it, you give them credit.
You give them credit for the masters.
If they're coming in as a critical care, you don't.
They get the 2 years.
Yeah, you do.
She's saying if it's not in the specialty that we're hiring them for.
So if we're hiring them to be an NTP, and they've got a master's of nursing, you can't, you're saying, are you asking whether you can give them the
No,
master's
if they have
credit?
like a master's in like a psych nurse, but we're hiring them to be a clinical, do
If
we
it-
still give them the credit?
Yes, you have to.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a master's of nursing.
Absolutely.
Now, they might not be doing that in the Air Force,
But they still got that
but it
degree.
is a master's degree in nursing.
Even if they don't have it completed, if they're gonna complete it before they.
You just project it
Yeah,
out.
you might as well reject it.
Same thing
Yeah,
with like,
because
yeah.
you're gonna end up messing up their scroll.
Same thing. I think you talked about it, like figuring out what COT date is going to be most beneficial to them based off of you know work experience and what we would scroll them at. Same thing. We're projecting it out that they're going to be at this pay grade when they ED.
Right, now if you got a master's of science in nursing and you were coming in to be a PA, no, that
Yeah,
doesn't work.
that's a different.
right?
Yeah.
All right, so, skip a line, limit the total service credit awarded for the person to receive an entry grade of major unless granted a waiver. We'll talk about that. Do not award Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, any of the Academy graduates any credit for education, training, service, or experience they gained before graduating from the Academy. Because essentially that's just their 4-year, that's your bachelor's degree. We don't give credit for a bachelor's degree, that's your ticket in the door. Okay? So, you can list it on the 1431, but it'll be zeros, right? Zeros. Same thing for HPSP. Zeros. You'll need to get the prior service documents, but as far as awarding them credit for the time they were in med school, no.
I got a question.
Yep.
So say you have an applicant, and we'll just use nurse corps as an example, that was an 03 in the Army under a different specialty, but with their even their half credit, say it's still equaled up to maybe captain, and they're coming in as an HPSP.
MSC. HBSPs are MSC always, but go ahead.
MSC.
Yeah.
So you commission them because I think
just answered your question.
you commission them into the MSC Corps, and they're always for HBSC purposes, they're always scrolls in 01.
Yeah. So the Medical Service Corps is controls the HPSP.
I think there was a question out there in email though, is what happens once they graduate if they were.
So AFIT, I got the answer to that. AFIT will, in their final year, AFIT goes back in, calculates everything for their, basically they calculate their 1431 form, prior service, work experience, all of that. AFIT will recalculate it and submit them to the active duty scroll, and so AFIT handles it.
So they're doing exactly what a recruiter would do with prior service and structure. So they go from, they could go from a captain as a nurse, now they're MSC 01 for those, 2, 3, 4 years, and once they finish, they can be, theoretically an 05, or 04, based on drawing all that back into it.
But they just have to be scrolled as a 01 just so that they can pay them the stipend and pay for their school. So.
Note number 6.
I knew the answer to that. I just wanted to ask that question just in case somebody.
Thank you.
We could tell when you said MSC in your eyes.
Yeah, like all of a sudden the engine was running, but nobody was behind the wheel. Right?
Note number 6, AFPC may award credit under Rule 10 only if that specialty is determined to be urgent. Do not award credit under Rule 10 unless Rule 9 has been maxed out. So let's go to Rule 9. Rule 9 says half credit for the first 6 years. Okay? So half credit for the first 6 years work experience. But if you're on the special list, they'll allow you, if you've maxed out, if you've got the 3 years, they'll allow you to then roll into Rule 10, which says day for day, brother, after that. So this is where these physicians and the dentists start making lieutenant colonel when they're coming in through the door. Because if they're not on that list, they're capped at major. Rule 10 allows them to start adding those days in addition to the 3 years that everybody else can get. Make sense? So, huh?
Did you cover?
Yeah, I've got the list, and we'll go through that. But yeah, so the first threshold that every officer has to meet is half credit for the first 6 years, which means 3 years. So once you get them to 3 years, only then, and if they're on the list, can they start getting day for day. Make sense?
Yes.
Capped at 14.
It depends. We'll go into that. If you go to page 57, it starts talking about nursing. Constructive service credit for a master's degree in nursing, 24 months. Makes sense. A PhD in nursing, 48 months. See note 2. No additional credit is authorized for a master's level degree in the same or related field. Okay. D&P, 24 months. See note 3. Must be certified. The rest of this stuff is no surprise. Then it talks about BSc, what you can give for the specific degrees. Social workers. Any questions on those?
Yeah.
The note section pretty much repeats what it was for the physicians and dentists. Let me see if there's any specifics. Note number 7, this is key. Let's say you're working a clin psych and they get accepted to a residency program. Award 48 months of service credit to an individual accepted for the clin psych internship program, even though they haven't received a degree yet. Highlight that. I think this is the only case where the Air Force says, we'll go ahead and give it to you even though you haven't earned it, right? Because these are folks that are 3 years into it. We're going to go ahead and give them the 4th year with up front.
I have an aerospace physiologist that I just ran through AFRS. On here it says that he needs a PhD in specific field, exercise science.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought he was coming in with 2 years. Come to find out he was coming in with 4 years.
Well, or related degree that's accepted. So that is a unique career field because it can vary. I mean, I've seen folks with kinesiology degrees come in as aerophys, zoology, and of course physiology. So it really differs. So the max that you can give them is 48 months for the PhD. But if it's a master's in zoology, 2 years. Make sense? Do not award any, Rule 8, do not award folks that complete an internship as a part of their baccalaureate program.
Bless you.
Thanks.
On the back page, it's talking about don't give credit for more for periods of unemployment more than 30 days. If you require a license, experience starts from the time of licensure and full employment, right? Rule 13 describes that. An individual achieves full-time professional experience by being employed 40 hours per week. And it talks about if it's less. Table 10.6 talks about advanced degrees that might be loosely affiliated with what they're coming in as and whether it can be credited. Very rarely have I ever seen that be the case, though. So, but just understand that it's out there. In those situations where you run across somebody, just make sure to check the AFI, and if it's uncertain or if it asks for consideration, get that consideration first before you make promises. Okay, any questions on that?
Question.
Yep.
Does it specifically say for each core that they have to be accredited, or they could be foreign schools or anything like that? Does it say specifically in there?
It talks about the foreign medical graduate,
Right.
For physicians.
Right.
So if you've got an individual that graduated from a med school or residency or whatnot, they need to have that, and they understand that. That's just the practice. If they want to practice in the United States, they have to have that. But to your point, if the accrediting body, like for nurses, it's NLCN or CCN, whatever, if that body recognizes it, then you're good to go. But you have to get that approval they have to get the approval from that accreditation, because they're the ones that determine whether it's good or not. I've had providers have to get their stuff translated because it was all in Romanian, or whatnot. So there's services for that. Questions? All right, go to the red tab. This is more 2005. I wanted you to see table 11.1, that table in the front. Grade determination. To be eligible for appointment in the grade of lieutenant colonel, they have to have at least 18 years. Now, we're going to, and that's the reserve. And we're going to deconflict that here in a minute. On another page. But this is table 11.1 is, and I don't know how long you've been in HP, but I hear it's changed recently where you commission folks on the active duty, right? Growing up in HP, we never did that. We only in emergency cases. Most of the time, once they got selected and all the stars aligned, OPM, graduated, they had their licensure, NCLEX, or whatever, we commissioned them a year in advance. And we could have their orders a year in advance. With the entry grade annotated that they're going to come in on this day at this rank and head into this assignment. And it was a pleasant experience because you had plenty of time to, provide them orders. They could go and reach forward to their gaining base and get put on a housing list and child care and all the trappings that we're accustomed to as military members of getting orders in hand early. So the discriminating factor was they were reserve officers, and you had to abide by reserve rules until they became active. This is one of those rules that you have to abide by. For the most part, everything lines up and there's no conflict. But there's two ranks where there is. One being from captain to major, and from the second one being major to lieutenant colonel. If you notice, for a major, to be a reserve major, you gotta have 11 years. Active duty, you only have to have 10. If you're a physician, and a lot of times, I'm talking physicians and dentists because those are the most difficult ones. But we'll go through each one of them. But for a physician to be a major, all they need is 10 years active duty. But to commission them in the reserves, it's 11. Lieutenant colonel, 18 years as a reserve, only 16 active duty. So just be aware of that. And you see colonel at least 21 years.
So is it safe to say that a nurse nurse in the reserves that has 11 years, or no, a nurse in the reserves that has 10 years comes into active duty as a captain, and then pretty much right after that, they'll be in line to have major, almost directly after.
If you look at next page, Rule 3, for Nurse Corps, BSc, and MSc officers, they're appointed for the sole purpose of entering the regular Air Force, at least 14 years to be major. So that's their threshold.
Yep.
So when you're filling out a 1431 for a nurse, a BSc officer, or an MSc, down on the bottom where it says maximal allowable credit, 14. And that's where you can point back to, this is why it's 14, because the FI says so. So you can highlight that.
For the nurse, this may be a silly question, but for the nurse corps, wouldn't it kind of be impossible?
Pretty much, unless they're prior service.
Right, prior service, if they were prior service, it would have to have been in the same corps for them to even get up to that number to make that rank, and obviously, by that point, they probably had the rank to begin with, which means they would keep the rank coming in.
They're rarely surprised, you know, about this. So they've been in the Guard a hell of a long time. As an MSC officer, they get half credit, or they've been in the Guard for a long time as a nurse corps, and they get full credit. They roll in with a master's or a doctorate, you know, so all the things that line up.
Yeah.
If you see paragraph 11.2, maximum entry grade credit, it just reinforces the fact that credit cannot be exceeded for the entry grade of major. We saw what the entry grade of major is for Nurse Corps, BSc, and MSc. Right below that, 11.2.1, Secretary of the Air Force may waive that limit for lieutenant colonels if they're on the special list. We'll go through the special list. This is why it's so important to have that constructive service credit list every year, so you'll know when you're sitting down with a physician or a dentist whether they're going to be able to come in as lieutenant colonel or not, because that's a big pay discrepancy. But 11.2 is where it talks about that. There's even cases where we put in full bird colonels. 11.2.1.2, forward recommendations for appointment as a colonel only when the president approves it. I mean, it's a heck of a long time to get those guys to approve. I've only seen one in the 12 years.
Oh, I see you guys are busy. I'll just take these cookies back.
Oh. What?
Oh.
All right.
I'm about to tackle you.
All right, 65, page 65. Rule 3, it talks about a former regular Air Force officer who's discharged and accepts an appointment in the reserves in the same category without a break in service. So they get out of the active duty, they go to the reserves.
Cookie break.
Whatever rank they are, that's the rank they're coming in as. There's exceptions for National Oceanic Administration and public health and that thing, and we'll go over that. But if they're a physician and they've got this on their collar, they have to come in at that. There's nothing you can do. It all fleshes itself out, I guess, but the bottom line is that's the rule. So if they're a colonel in the Georgia Army Guard in the Nurse Corps and they want to apply, they have to apply as a lieutenant colonel for us. Okay? There's no way around it. Now, if they don't want them, then that's another story. And a lot of times that's where they get them filtered out. Okay, we'll let them meet the board, but we don't want this person at that rank with that lack of experience. But the bottom line is you don't have the authority to downgrade them. It is what it is. Make sense? Rule 7, it talks about public health. You have to determine the service credit. If they're a public health officer and they say, I'm a major in the public health service. Okay. How many years of full-time experience do you have? So you have to go through just like they're brand new. and determine whether they're gonna come in as a major. Most of the time they won't. So be wary of that.
So that little, in the perfect app, it has that statement, if you're currently holding rank, it just transfers over, but that doesn't apply to public health?
It doesn't apply to public health, and it doesn't apply for National Oceanic Administration. If you look at the orange sheet, that's one of the notes on the bottom. Rule 7.
That happened to us. We had a physician who was an 06 in public health service, and he could only get 05, and so he won.
Yeah, so, and granted, you still have to go through the motions of getting them released, so it's a conditional release. They have to get their wing equivalent or whatnot to release them in order to apply through us. But yeah, their rank holds no value to us. They have to break it down. How many hours? Was it full time? Was it acute care? Were you licensed? That sort of thing. It all has to be fleshed out and determine what their rank is. Okay. All right. So let's move on. There's a brown tab. This is the CSC service letter, constructive service letter. It's released every year. Very important document, like I said. A lot of times AFRS it's not their fault. They're just in receive mode. But we get these later than we would like. And the reason being is we need to know if we're going to have one-on-one COI with this physician and spouse, whether they're going to make $140,000 or $100,000. These things matter, right? And this letter breaks it down for us. So everything I talked about, half credit for the first 6 years, and then afterwards, day for day, after that, it's what it says here. In all these different acronyms, that's what it's saying. It says these individuals, U.S. Air Force, if you're preventive medicine, if you're emergency services, family medicine, all the way down, if there's an X by U.S. Air Force, then we will allow you to get day for day credit after the initial 3 years. And there's only one dentist, by the way. So the prosthodontist that comes in, major. The general dentist, major. OMS, major. Any questions?
So just to clarify, the radiologist, after taking away, he has 20 years after giving him half credit for the first 6 years. So he's got 11 years of work experience, 5-year residency, 4-year medical school, 20 years of service. Radiologist is on here, that'd be
16.
Lieutenant Colonel. Why 16?
Is total, because
that's
the only thing this allows you to do is waives the limit. If you look about 60% of the way, it says headquarters AFPC may waive the limit for appointment in the grade of Lieutenant Colonel in the specialties identified below.
So he can only get the minimum for Lieutenant
Right.
Colonel, not
whatever
the
it would
extra
take
2 years.
for him to make Lieutenant Colonel. 16 years.
Okay.
And so we'll go over that on the.
So you still on the 1431 calculate it all?
You can calculate
but just
everything.
put 16 instead of 20 down there.
16.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll go over the form and how to populate it, but yeah, you can total the 20. He'll total 25 if he's got it, just so he knows that you're tracking, but then also pull this out and pull this out and say, unfortunately, to protect you, it's all in how you sell it, to protect you from being ineligible for promotion twice, we're going to cap you at Lieutenant Colonel so you have a chance to make Colonel. Because if we let this joker come in as an experienced Lieutenant Colonel and he gets passed over twice, he's out. So his dreams of serving for the next couple of years are over.
So when will they consider the 21 years for Colonel? Because I'm estimating, without looking at his CV, but if he's got 20 years and 8 months, and then by the time he EADs, it'd be 21. When will they consider that?
5
coverage?
years. 5 years.
So those numbers there where it says 16 for lieutenant colonel, 21 for colonel, those are for people that are currently into. Those are the standards for people, or can it?
It varies because again, it's just like any other master sergeant board or senior master sergeant board. They see the person's record.
Right, because this is just for entry.
This is just
for entry grade. So
yeah.
whether they put on 2 years after they come in as a lieutenant colonel or not, that's up to the board, right?
Right, exactly. But just in general, for projection purposes, say you're looking around 5 years before you'd have a clear shot at full bird.
But
and that's not guaranteed either.
But you're saying that one time someone did get approved as an 06.
Yep.
When does that come into play? I'm saying if I calculated and he actually does have 21 years, would they consider him, or because I can't downgrade him? You said
we have to submit them for colonel. We tried with Blanchard's guy.
You will. They'll come. They come back pretty quickly.
If you submit him for lieutenant colonel and he's got 22 years credit, they have to submit him for colonel.
Okay, so if he does have 21, then I'll submit him for colonel and wait till they downgrade.
Yep.
Okay.
Now the problem you have with that is scrolls, because if they're under consideration for colonel, you're in purgatory because you can't submit it for colonel, and they won't let you submit it for lieutenant colonel because it's still under consideration, even though they know it's not going to be approved. And so we can get this. Let's just go ahead and let the train leave the depot and get this thing rolling. And now we got to wait. And so we waited until finally they said, "Yeah, we're not going to let it." Thanks.
So
and in that process, which used to be hella long, was started 4 or 5 months waiting on Lieutenant Colonel Scroll.
Now, I think with Blanchard's guy, though, didn't we have him sign a letter saying that he was accepting lieutenant colonel no matter what?
Yeah, something like
and
that.
So we were able to scroll him as a lieutenant colonel because he was just going to take.
They've got that form letter that says that I know that I'm eligible for colonel, but I will. Yeah.
So yeah, that was an added benefit of that. You know, in May, they thought that they were submitting them, but there was no follow through, and I discovered when I got there that he was never scrolled. So
is there no timeline out there that says like after entry holding this grade you'll be eligible for promotion to nothing?
No, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there probably is regulations out there that says what makes somebody eligible for the next grade, but the only ones that I know of are the entry grade regulations. I would assume there's probably some regulations out there that says that you have to have this much time.
Well,
this much.
Just like A1C airman, A1C senior airman, if you come in as a captain, you know that you'll make major in if you're bringing in 4 years, you know you'll make major in 6 because 10 years, right? And again, there's below the zone, there's different criteria for officers, but when you're projecting a sale, if you're giving them pay prospectus and letting them anticipate, you can say, in addition to the every other year pay increase, you can start projecting the rank increase as well, especially if they're going into FAP. FAP is beautiful because you can go ahead and say, okay, you're going medical HPSP. So you got 4 years. What do you want to? Oh, emergency medicine. Okay, emergency medicine. So that's another 3 years. When you finish emergency medicine, you're going to be 1 year from being, a major or whatever, and this is what you're going to be making. And so you can illustrate for them exactly what they're going to be making at these different thresholds. So that's the beauty of knowing full well when they worst case scenario would be putting these ranks on. But again, there's early movers, and as always, but for planning purposes, you want to be as credible as can. Say this is worst case scenario, assuming you don't, beat your wife or get a DUI or whatever. these are the things that you can expect to make. Make sense?
So major's automatic now, or?
Major's automatic. Yeah, it's 100% promotion rate here.
When they start doing
A couple of years ago.
I'm gonna apply for the board.
Yeah, that was a big story just a couple years ago.
Yeah.
That was 100% select rate. I mean, they're still selected, but it,
I'm missing colors here. So
unless
what-
you're,
what
like
color
you
we
said,
on now?
unless you're.
We went,
We were on brown.
All I've got is 4 colors.
we went through,
Let's talk about three.
We haven't done purple.
And yellow.
All right, pink. Pink is the, all right, so pink, now, remember where we came from. We had a legacy special pay. We're talking special pays now. We had a legacy, and that was for when me and Sean came into HP. We always did legacy. And now, recently, they've transitioned to solely the CSP, Consolidated Special Plans. If you look at the legacy pay plans, man, there was all kinds of stuff. The bonus, the variable, additional incentive, multi-year ISP, with MSP, and then you had board certification pay. It could be very difficult, and that's why on the 1431 you'll see all those different pays at the bottom. Now, as of January, nobody that comes in the Air Force can do legacy. It's all CSP.
So, does that mean that we're gonna get an updated 1431 that
I'm not
reflects the?
I would be asking that question.
In about 10 years.
If you go to EPUBs, they don't recognize 1431. I had to go pull it from my archives just so we could go over it. So everybody that comes in, CSP, and there's only 4 things that you can give them. The bonus, that's
Yellow.
That's back on black. That's your bonus. Those for doctors, right? Critical session skill. Incentive pay, we'll go over that. Retention bonus, you can't have both accessions and retention bonus. It's one or the other. And there's caveats to it, but we'll go over it. And then board certification pay. If they're board certified, then you can give them that pay. Make sense? And it tells consecutive, concurrent, consecutive, concurrent. We talked about that initial military obligation. Somebody's never been in the Air Force before, military before, they come in as a physician, it's 36 months. And then everything else is applied to that 36 months, whether it be consecutive or concurrent. Concurrent means, let's say that the Health Professions Loan Repayment Program, it's a 2-year commitment. That's free money because they already had a 3-year commitment. Now they're going to sign an agreement that says 2 years. I'll take that all day long. So they don't incur any additional time. Now, they may incur they may not be eligible for certain things because they took the loan repayment. They can't get the retention bonus. They can't, I think it's just the retention bonus that they're not authorized while they're serving out that obligation for loan repayment. But anyway, pink is handy to have. Let me go back to yellow. Yellow is talking about IP and retention bonus rates. Family medicine walks in your office. I'm ready to join. You can immediately start doing the math to determine what their pay is. They're all eligible for IP. So you look for family medicine, $43,000 per year. So every year they'll sign a contract for $43,000, and that'll be part of their annual pay. If they didn't take the accession bonus and they want to do retention, and they want to do a retention and sign a contract for just 1 year, it's 43. Who would do that? Or let's do a 2-year commitment, 17,000. 3-year, 25,000. 4-year, 38,000. So basically that starts adding to their obligation, and we retain them longer in exchange. Makes sense? Next page, you got the board certification pay. 6,000 lump, or 6,000 equal.
I got a question, just going back to this, just to make sure I understand it for this program. So just like we're talking about family medicine, retention bonus, 3 years, that's 75,000 per year for 3 years. Is that the way I understand that, or is it just 25,000 each year?
Per year. So let's say that.
We're paying them more for the longer commitment. They're making more money per year.
Yep.
Yeah.
So family medicine, and it's a 3 year. They get 25,000, 25,000, 25,000
Okay.
each year.
That's on top of the incentive pay, right, Chief?
Correct.
Yeah. Just make sure.
Because if you reflect back to the other sheet, the legacy, man, they had additional, they had variable, they had incentive pay, multi-year incentive pay. So you had all these amounts. The amount hasn't gotten less. It's just what we call those pays has decreased. And so the lump, the pay is still there. It's just very simple to understand now. So yeah. Retention bonus is where it's at if you don't have that accession bonus. Purple. This is 41,109. It talks about special pays. The reason I printed this out is I wanted y'all to understand how to calculate what their special pay rate would be. Legacy plan, for instance, variable. The reason it's called variable because based on what your years of experience were, determined your level of pay. Same thing for board certification. Determining your special pay credible service determined what your board certification pay was going to be. Now it's standardized across the AFMS, but I wanted you to see this is what they're talking about. It's paragraph 4213, dental officers. They receive credit for all periods of active service, internship or residency while not on active duty. That's what special pays were based on. Same thing for medical officers. Active duty service as a doctor and residency or subspecialty training. Make sense? And of course, there's statements that say, if you didn't complete the training, you don't get the credit. So if they get kicked out of their residency, you're not going to get credit for it. Chief residency, if you're 6 months of a chief residency program, you get that credit. 42144. Medical Corps officers receive training credit equal to the standard number of years required by the appropriate specialty board. So what that is telling you, if it's family medicine, it's 3 years. It may have taken him 4 years to get through it because he's a knucklehead. 3 years is all we're going to give him. Okay? And it explains that. Who required 6 years to complete a 5 year will only see 5 years. You can't repeat a year of internship. If it's a foreign medical facility, as long as it's credentialed, you get credit. And it talks about board certification. So
the reason why I asked the foreign school, so a MD in Venezuela is considered It's basically a
Master.
4-year undergrad degree. They go through an undergrad program and
Yeah.
they get their MD. So if they come here, are we giving them credit for an MD when
So-
they're basically gonna?
So in Korea, they do. It's like 6 years where
Right.
their undergrad and their doctorate are all one. He still got credit for an MD. He did a U.S. based residency, but they still give him credit for.
I would assume it'd be up to the
Just the
core.
4
You would have to
Didn't
send it to
the board look at that though? Is that one that we looked at
No.
2 weeks ago? Oh, okay.
No, we've had it a few times.
Oh, okay.
I just know that, I just didn't know if there was anything written anywhere or anything, if it's always something that we have to send to the board, or to the core to say, hey, look.
Anytime you're dealing with foreign
You just go to the
countries,
board.
you always gotta get their buy-in on it. So, you wanna take a break? Push through? Come and go as you please?
Let's do a break.
All right, 5 minutes break.
Cookie break.